G'day, folks, wherever you're listening or watching us from, whether you're live or joining us from the recording. It's Mike House with our Wednesday webcast where we talk about what it takes to be unshakable in the interesting and uncertain times that we find ourselves in the world right now. My guest today is Wil Massara. Wil's a 19-year-old young guy here in WA who a year ago started the Youth Leadership Academy. At 15, he realised he's a problem solver and he saw some problems with the school system and got about solving those. I find that really interesting because when I was 15, I could certainly tell you plenty of problems with school, but it wasn't in my mind to even consider solving them or what I might do about them. So, Wil, that's an interesting frame for yourself, a problem solver, and especially at your age. What kind of got you into that, I guess, mindset?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you kind of bridge that gap between seeing an issue and then thinking about solutions and making stuff happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make two notes. Turned 18 last week, Mike, 2 weeks ago.
Not 19 sorry, yet.
Mate. That's all right.
Trying to put an extra year on you already.
I know. No, thanks. I'm already old enough. No. I guess for me, it was primary school when I really started establishing this problem-solving mindset. And a story that sort of started my entrepreneurial journey, you could say, was when I was 11, I went on a family holiday and we had a very stressful air travel experience. And from that, when I was 11, I read a quote by Malcolm X, which said, "If not me, then who, and if not now, then when?" And I had a solution. It was simply to build a website. And the mission of the website was to create a less stressful air travel experience. And the website was called Planepedia. It was the Wikipedia of planes. And over the next few years, I grew it to a point of, by 15, I partnered with Qantas and Singapore Airlines as their media rep in Perth. And what that taught me when I partnered with these two airlines was my age isn't really any barrier anymore. If two major airlines, some of the biggest airlines in the world, can see me as a individual of my profession, not as a 15-year-old who wants to have a plane website, I knew I really could do a whole lot more than what I was already doing. And I had a very unique opportunity in 2016 to attend a 5-day camp called the Magic Moments Youth Leadership Business Summit. And what that taught me was my differences were my greatest asset. Because I went into high school with a plain website, something that's different, something that's not normal, and I was concerned about what people thought. But as I went through high school and started owning this, I started growing it and started living in alignment with the Planepedia and its brand. And that's when I sort of got to year 10 and I was selecting my subjects for year 11, and I felt compelled. I felt so held back, you could say, and like, I knew that if I didn't make ATAR happen, I knew there were other options.
Yeah.
I knew that there were different pathways, but it was painted out as this picture as either make or break. You either do your year 11 and 12 to like the top standard, or you won't succeed.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting the way that's framed, isn't it? And I'm not sure that we do anybody a service with that frame. There's, particularly now, the reality of the world is that we'll all change careers a lot of times, and school's just one part of that journey. It certainly helps if you get a good education while you're there and you work hard and apply yourself, but it's by no means the end of it. My brother's another good case in point of that. He, when he was in his early 40s, decided, having left school at year 11, he decided that he wanted to be a dentist. So, he took himself back to school, got a grade that got him into uni, went to uni, studied dentistry, and now runs a successful dental practice. So, you can kind of slot in, change direction, go wherever you really want to go. What was that experience like? So it sounds as though Planepedia was actually a commercial going concern when you were in year 10, yeah?
It wasn't making money. I mean, I sold merchandise. So I sold 200 pens in 2 weeks. And it was more of was more of a passion project that lasted 5 years.
Sure.
And when I went into year 11 and started again, read that quote by Malcolm X, if not me, then who, and if not now, then when. And that's when I actually started Youth Leadership Academy in 2018. Over the next 3 months of building up Youth Leadership Academy, I realized I had to say no to be able to say yes.
Yeah.
And the no for me was to Planopedia.
Yeah.
So in 2018, I actually turned off Planopedia, and it's still sitting there. Like I can turn it on at any point, but there's just the passion isn't necessarily there anymore, you could say. Whereas my passion for youth leadership was going up, and I had so many more commitments. And that was in planning for the first event, which was dedicated to simply bringing that 5-day event that I was blessed with in 2016 to Perth in a financially viable way for every student, and teaching the things that weren't taught in school. So leadership, entrepreneurship, teamwork, communication. That were the 4 pillars that we started off with. And
so you ran a 5-day event?
No.
Here?
I condensed that 5-day event into a 1-day event for $20.
Wow.
That was like I didn't have the resources to run a 5-day event. So as a 15-year-old, I was like, okay, how can I do something like this in Perth?
Yeah.
And the way I seen it was a 1-day platform with a bunch of speakers, students, and in August of 2018, that came to life with 65 students. And 92% of them left there feeling more confident to lead their community. And for me and the person, Maddie, who ran the event with me, helped me plan that event, I didn't necessarily start Youth Leadership Academy for a business. I started it as a financial platform to run this event legally. And after that first event, we realized the impact that we had in Perth on that day needed to be further and wider. So 6 months later, we took it national and hosted 4 of them events around the country in March of 2019. With 212 students. But the problem I knew within myself was that over that 6 months of planning between that first event and that tour, I was so focused on getting bums on seats and making it break even and making sure that I wasn't in the red. And that led to us having 35% of seats sold out. So it wasn't a huge success. But then 12 months later, just recently in March, realigned myself with the event objectives of creating a safe space where students can be ambitious with no limitations, helping them become more aware of their ability to make an impact and things like that. I really focused on them and how we could achieve it. So in March of 2020, we hosted 5 events around the country and sold out every single one with 760 students from 80 schools.
Wow.
So that was like, okay, let's be in alignment for the rest of my life then.
Yeah. So that's a really significant insight. This is something that people that have got a significant amount more years on the planet than you have not yet nailed, which is that sort of clarity of purpose and alignment with that. What sort of journey did you take to come up with those 2 objectives that you just stated so clearly?
Yeah. So there's 6, but the rest of them are like based around leadership, teamwork, communication, entrepreneurship. The 2, so I found out like my X factor of Youth Leadership Academy Australia is simply because we're for youth by youth, 100%. When I was running these events, I was in high school. I knew what it was like firsthand. I was doing ATAR at some points. My peers were all doing it in different parts. So them objectives have come from simply like, you could call it market research almost, but simply talking to people. We aren't provided with a space where we can be ambitious with no limitations. There's always the fact like our parents, our teachers, that they don't want us to be ambitious, not because they are trying to shut down our dreams, because they're scared of what might happen if it doesn't work out. And then the awareness of our ability to make impact comes from a larger portion of the media paints young people as negative. So 93% of media published about young people is negative, which simply isn't empowering, doesn't make young people want to do anything more, and it doesn't help them. So sort of providing that space where they can really see some real life examples of young people doing cool stuff. We have this segment of the event that's called the Changemakers Panel, where we bring in 3 local young people from their communities who are already doing cool stuff. And the aim is for students to leave that event and say, well, if they can do it, so can I.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. It's and I think it's inspiring for people, not just young people. It's inspiring full stop. I met a young guy in a session I ran for a school probably about 3 years ago now. It was a group of year 8s, and he had a very commercially successful business developing game scenes for a game company based in Japan. And like you say, there he is. He's what's year 8? 12, 13 years old. He's got a really high end laptop, and he's dealing with a large company globally, making a sizable amount of revenue. And he's doing all of that in his spare time in between classes. And for me, that was just really inspiring, because, as you say, it's a very, very different frame from you have to be successful at school to get somewhere. And, it's certainly not discounting the value of education and schooling and application to those pursuits. I think that's also important. But I reckon there's an and there where, if people can tap into whatever their unique abilities are and really play to those strengths, that's a sizable part of us being unshakable in the world that we live in. So what would you describe as your biggest challenge in bringing that? Well, let's go this at 2 levels. So firstly, in making that transition from a first year of a successful event, a second year of, or slightly later, trying to get a few events that didn't go as well, and then turning that around into a really successful run. There's a lot of people that have a crack at things and it doesn't work the way they expected, and so they go, oh, well, that's obviously not a thing, and they just drop it. So what was the biggest challenge you faced in, I guess, resetting for those subsequent cracks?
Yeah. So I guess for me, being a 16-year-old, trying to convince government agencies, you could say, as schools, because the way the events work, schools bring students. So a 16-year-old trying to convince schools that we're a safe environment where they can bring their students to was probably the hardest thing that I've had to do over the last 3 years, which we've now built up a reputation where we are safe, we have all the right stuff, and it's probably come from a lot of professionality point of view. I'm really lucky because whilst I spent 5 years on Planopedia, I learnt skills in website design, marketing, videos, Facebook ads, like everything. So I haven't really had, whilst yes, that doesn't really happen anymore, I've converted all them skills into here where I've been able to design professional websites and build up the professionality to a point where it looks like a principal has done it as well. And that was also another big change in the 2 tours. I also have a great friend of mine, Maddie, who is a school teacher now, who helps write all the emails that schools get to make them buzzwords, you could say, in alignment with what the school needs to hear for them to trust us, almost. In Gold Coast last year, we had 12 people at the event, which wasn't necessarily on the outside perceived as a success, but then 12 people had the most impactful experience. And 3 of them then went on to more programs, including the 5-day one that I went to 4 years ago. So there's obviously it doesn't make it's not financially successful. It costs a lot of money to run that event, but the impact that we had at that event was so wow. And then there's also it's been very hard in year 12. I made the decision to leave ATAR and not necessarily get a Western Australian certificate of education, which was an easy choice for me. But for my parents, it was also like that. We're actually going to let our child let him do this. And for them, it was really scary as well.
Mm. Mm. So fears are, that's an interesting challenge. We all run up against that in all kinds of environments, and some of the territory that I spend my working life working around is, when we're afraid, we're less effective. The mechanisms around that literally shut down the thinking part of our brain, make us more narrowly focused and less able to effectively respond. I reckon it's a really critical skill for people to be able to lean into fear. I think it's one of the things that keeps us agile and nimble. It's one of our collectively greatest gifts as humans, as a species, is that we can perceive fear in that kind of way, and we can overcome it and get stuff done. So, that's all taken as read, but it's sometimes easier said than done. So have you got tactics you use for yourself that when you're in those moments of, yep, this is actually pretty scary what I'm about to undertake, but I'm going to have a crack anyway?
Yeah. There's definitely two questions that I ask myself when it's like, oh, what do I do? The first one being, what is the worst that can happen? And the second one being, what will I miss if I don't do it?
Yeah,
what opportunities will I miss out on?
Yeah, that second question's a great one. I like that.
Yeah, it's like if you don't do that jump, you'll never be able to, you may never get that opportunity again.
So you're touring the country, you're talking to other young people about leadership and entrepreneurship and citizenship in all kinds of ways, and you're helping them to see their potential and get fired up. What's your take on the current situation that we're in with COVID and leadership around that?
So yeah, I was very, very lucky. We finished our final event of the 2020 tour on the 17th of March.
Good timing.
Restrictions came in on the 19th of March.
Yeah.
Very, very heavily, very quickly. I remember we were sitting on the floor of the Sydney hotel, calling up Department of Education, they're like, you can still run the event, but if the schools don't rock up, they don't rock up. I was like, okay. And we did have 50% of the people pulled out the day before, which we understood, and we just were like, okay, come next year. So we were very, very lucky that we made it through our events in that time span. And what we experienced over the next few months, obviously all our in-school programs and community engagement programs got cancelled, and there was a whole lot of online learning for students, and there still is. Obviously in Melbourne, there's firing back up online learning. And my biggest message throughout this entire time is this is why we need to teach our young people to become flexible and be able to adapt to change. It is what we do it in every program in a school, flexibility, ability to adapt to change, because it's so, so crucial right now. Teenagers and young adults are feeling most affected by coronavirus and their economic impacts, because we take up the majority of the hospitality industry. And we're expected to feel the pain over the next 10 years.
Yep.
Unless we become flexible and we be able to adapt to change. And this is my big message for why we're running community programs in November, with the main focus around becoming flexible and being able to be resilient leaders beyond coronavirus, beyond COVID-19. And when we get resilient leaders, young leaders are often not, because I know for me, I can't impact every single young person. It's about, we provide the skills to one young person, and then they teach what they are taught throughout their community and beyond that. So the ripple effect is what we're really focused on, and empowering them to realize, again, their ability to teach these things and have that impact on their community.
So that's an interesting point as well. Do you reckon that position of teaching and passing stuff on is that something for everybody, or is that a kind of sprinkle that in as an idea and hope that some people will grab it and run with it?
So the way we do programs is they're broken in two parts. First part being all the skills, second part being student-led initiatives. And that's where we provide them with they find a problem within their community or their school, and then they find a solution. And then over the next 3 months, we support them to make sure that solution actually becomes a reality.
Yeah, nice.
For the first time ever, a lot of them have been listened to. Like, they're not being ignored. Their ideas aren't being shut down. That they're becoming empowered to realize they can do things and they can really start. And not only that, but people outside of that group are watching them do it. So it might not necessarily be directly teaching them, but they could be watching it, being that role model almost.
Yeah, and in some ways, that's a more effective way of teaching, isn't
it? Absolutely.
Actually, just leading by example is a great way to influence people around you. So, are there any examples of leadership, either from young people or from organisations, government, etc., that you've been paying attention to during this period, where you go, oh yeah, that's good. They've really done a great job of that. And why? Why do they stand out?
Yeah, I did have a really good one, obviously. But I guess, like, for me, it's on a broad spectrum, not necessarily specifically. It is that leading by example. It is that saying, like, when people are, like, on the ground supporting their team, and not just, like, I think a lot about leadership is not about assuming, and instead it's about, like, our team needs. For me, there's obviously a lot of talk about ScoMo and him leaving the country during the fires, and then again taking a break during a global pandemic. And my perspective on this, which is probably a little bit, we have a lot of family arguments about this. My perspective is, if it was Alan Qantas leaving his company in the middle of a crisis, he would be fired. And really, I see ScoMo. I don't mind him if he was in a company term, he's the CEO of Australia, and Australia is in a crisis and we're about to go bankrupt. And this is when I think we need leadership that really leads by example, and they need a solid team, and then the people below him need to realize they can rely on them.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. As that sort of visibility and consistent presence is a pretty key theme there.
Exactly. Like, for everyone deserves a holiday and a break. Maybe just not in the middle of a crisis where we need the most support we've needed in ever.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, being a solutions-oriented person, have you got things that you would that you'd be having a crack at and rolling out if you were in a position to do those at the moment?
I think that was probably the big thing with starting Youth Leadership Academy. When I was in year 11, obviously I knew I couldn't go into government. And instead of going into government, I was going to fix the government from the outside by simply supplying the things that they weren't supplying. And I'm very happy with Mark McGowan, so I'm keen to have a chat with him. And I obviously know that my vision is, obviously, over the next 10, 20 years, the curriculum will change and it will begin to evolve. We see STEAM now, which is sports, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And arts are being more and more valued, which is so crucial because it's one of the fastest growing industries. Yet sometimes I believe like the other day there was funding cut again, which we don't really understand, but hey. Yeah. So I do believe that change is evolving, but it's going to take time. And in that meantime, there'll be a platform for young people to be able to learn about leadership. There'll be a platform for them to become entrepreneurs.
Nice. So what does unshakable mean to you? You know, if someone's able to lead or be unshakable, what does that kind of mean in your world?
I guess for me, when coronavirus hit, I obviously lost every bit of in-live programs there was. I remember we were sitting on the train, I think, going to Brisbane, and I was calling my travel agent. I was like, okay, we're going to cancel every single flight. Please just get me home tonight. I need to And me, who was on tour with me, instead of going on to another 3 programs, we flew out of Brisbane the night after the final event of the tour. And obviously there was a bit of a bummer there, but that 10 days later, I launched an online leadership program for teenagers. Like, I think for me, Unshakable is being able to not dwell on the things that obviously don't go to plan, and instead to be that flexible and be able to adapt to change. I knew that a whole bunch of people were going to go into homeschooling. A whole bunch of people were going to have to be online, and parents were going to have to deal with their students almost for indefinitely. And this 6-week online leadership program was a platform where they could learn these skills regardless of where they are. And we smashed it out in a week. I mean, it was like 10 days, I think, after tour, it was up and ready to go. So for me, Unshakable means to be able to move on, but not to move on, move up.
Yep. Yeah, nice. So kind of evolve as a result of the circumstance rather than be broken by it.
Yeah, and I was very lucky. Like, I'll say I planned to create this program 2 years ago, but I was never forced into a situation where I needed to. And like, I could have simply said, "Oh, I'm pretty tired. Like, big tour, just had to spend like the last 4 months doing this, and like, now it's rest time." But there wasn't really an opportunity for that. It was either make it or say goodbye.
Yeah. So looking forward from here, what sort of impact would you like to have on the world? What have you got in mind?
Yeah. So since starting Youth Leadership Academy, I had the goal of positively impacting 5,000 young people by the end of 2020, and was
Looks like we've lost you there, Will. You're frozen and your audio's gone.
Oh.
Yep, you're back.
I'm back. Yeah. Good?
Yep, we lost you for a moment.
Cool. So, now I've lost. So Youth Leadership Academy had the mission of positively impacting 5,000 young people by the end of 2020.
Yep.
Coronavirus hit, not very much going to plan. Still very confident on achieving that goal because it's been something we started with at the start of 2018. And that's when we created an online youth young entrepreneur summit. Also, we positively impacted 1,000 people through that. And we've now impacted 3,000 young people, with another 2,000 to go by the end of the year.
Yeah, nice.
And beyond that, there's that in March of 2021, we will be hosting events again, pending coronavirus. But also we are reaching communities, regions that aren't often supported by these programs. Northern Territory, they have to fly to a different state to be able to go to a leadership summit. Hobart have to fly. Anyone in Tasmania flies to Melbourne for a program. So we're going to places like that. We're going to Auckland as well. We're added Auckland to be able to reach that community also. And then beyond that, obviously go even further, more Pacific, internationally, and one day in the near future hit America. And we'll be over in Seattle to see Doug.
Good stuff. Well, thanks, Will, for your time and energy and enthusiasm. I think you're a great example of leadership in action, and that's really the intent of these conversations, is to give people some great examples that they can learn from, be inspired by, take some lessons out of. If people wanted to get in touch with you and find out more about Youth Leadership Academy or other work that you're doing, how would they do that?
They would go to, good grief. A website. We have a website. It is YLAAUS.com.
Perfect. And we'll add that into the comments and links and things when we post this more broadly as well, so people can access that.